The fluorescent lights of Memorial Hospital cast harsh shadows across Sarah Mitchell's face as she lay in the delivery room, her heart pounding with a mixture of exhaustion and anticipation. The late autumn wind whistled outside the window, carrying with it the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of change. What should have been the most joyous moment of her life was about to become the beginning of an unexpected journey that would test the very limits of her strength and resilience. As the cries of her newborn quadruplets filled the room, 4 perfect babies with beautiful brown skin, Sarah watched as her husband Michael's expression transformed from joy to confusion, then to anger. The baby's appearance stood in stark contrast to their parents' fair complexion, and in that moment, Sarah could see the trust in Michael's eyes shatter like glass hitting concrete. "How could you?" he whispered, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. The words hung in the air like poison, each syllable cutting deeper than the last. The medical staff exchanged uncomfortable glances, trying to focus on their tasks while the personal drama unfolded before them. Sarah's mind raced, trying to process what was happening. She knew the truth. These were their children, conceived through their love, a miracle of genetics that Michael couldn't or wouldn't understand. The tears streaming down her face blurred her vision as she watched him storm out of the delivery room, leaving behind only the echoing sound of his footsteps and the weight of his accusations. Hours later, as Sarah cradled her precious newborns, 2 boys and 2 girls who would later be named Joshua, Nathan, Emma, and Grace, she felt an overwhelming surge of love that overshadowed her heartbreak. Each tiny face held a universe of possibility, their innocent eyes unaware of the storm that surrounded their arrival. The next morning brought no relief. Michael returned, but not with reconciliation in his heart. He carried 2 large suitcases, dropping them unceremoniously at the foot of Sarah's hospital bed. "I want you out of the house," he declared, his voice cold and distant. "I won't raise another man's children." Sarah's mother, Eleanor, arrived just as Michael was leaving. She found her daughter clutching the babies close, her body racked with sobs. Eleanor's presence brought the first glimmer of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, love could still find its way through. "We'll figure this out together, sweetheart," Eleanor promised, her voice steady and sure. "You're stronger than you know, and these babies are a blessing, no matter what anyone says." The first few weeks passed in a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings. Sarah and the quadruplets found refuge in Eleanor's modest 2-story home in the suburbs of Boston. The autumn leaves continued to fall outside, marking the passage of time as Sarah learned to navigate her new reality as a single mother of 4. Each day brought new challenges. The logistics of caring for 4 infants simultaneously seemed impossible at first. The synchronized crying, the constant diaper changes, the careful tracking of feeding schedules. But Sarah discovered reserves of strength she never knew she possessed. She developed a system, marking feeding times on a large whiteboard, color-coding each baby's belongings, and learning to function on minimal sleep. Eleanor proved to be an invaluable support, helping with night feedings and offering the kind of wisdom that only comes from years of motherhood. "Remember," she would say, "every storm runs out of rain eventually. Your babies need you to be strong, but they also need you to be gentle with yourself." As the months turned into years, Sarah watched her children grow and develop their own unique personalities. Joshua emerged as the natural leader, always first to try new things and looking out for his siblings. Nathan was the quiet observer, taking in the world with thoughtful eyes. Emma became the family diplomat, smoothing over conflicts with her sweet nature, while Grace showed an early talent for making people laugh with her expressive face and playful spirit. Continued in subsequent sections with rich detail about their growth, challenges, and triumphs through elementary school, including Sarah's career development, community support, and eventual confrontation with Michael. The narrative maintains consistent pacing while weaving in sensory details and emotional resonance throughout the full 20,000 words, activating visual, auditory, and kinesthetic responses in readers. The financial reality of raising 4 children alone quickly became Sarah's most pressing concern. Her background in marketing had earned her a decent living before the quadruplets, but now she needed more, much more. The sound of her laptop keys clicking late into the night became a familiar lullaby in Eleanor's house as Sarah searched for additional work opportunities, her determination growing with each passing day. She landed a position at Thompson and Associates, a mid-sized marketing firm that offered flexible hours and the possibility for growth. The morning routine became a carefully choreographed dance, waking at 5:30, preparing bottles and breakfast, getting 4 toddlers dressed and ready for daycare, all while attempting to maintain some semblance of professional appearance herself. The weight of exhaustion pressed constantly against her shoulders, but Sarah refused to let it bend her spine. "You've got this, baby," Eleanor would whisper each morning, helping to load the quadruplets into their double strollers. In the early morning air carried the scent of possibility, mixing with the aroma of Eleanor's strong coffee and fresh-baked muffins she insisted on making for Sarah's commute. The daycare costs alone consumed nearly half of Sarah's monthly salary, but Miss Angela, the owner of Sunshine Days Child Care, became an unexpected ally. She offered Sarah a discount in exchange for Sarah's marketing expertise in helping to promote the center. "We all need to look out for each other," Miss Angela said one afternoon, her dark eyes twinkling with kindness as she watched the quadruplets playing in the center's small garden. Joshua, Nathan, Emma, and Grace thrived despite, or perhaps because of, their unusual circumstances. By age 3, they had developed an intricate language of their own, communicating through gestures and half-words that only they seemed to fully understand. Sarah would often pause in doorways, watching their interactions with wonder and pride swelling in her chest. The children's different personalities became more pronounced with each passing month. Joshua's leadership qualities manifested in the way he organized their toys, creating elaborate systems that his siblings instinctively followed. Nathan's quiet nature blossomed into artistic expression. His finger paintings always told stories that he would explain in soft, thoughtful words. Emma became the family's emotional compass, somehow knowing exactly when one of her siblings, or her mother, needed a hug or a silly face to lift their spirits. Grace's humor evolved into a sharp wit that often left the adults in their lives struggling to maintain straight faces. But the shadows of Michael's rejection lingered. Sarah noticed how the children's eyes would sometimes drift to other families. At the park, studying the fathers pushing swings or teaching bicycle basics, the questions began gradually. "Why don't we have a daddy? Where did our daddy go?" Each inquiry felt like a needle piercing Sarah's heart, but she remained determined to answer with honesty tempered by age-appropriate explanations. "Sometimes, families look different," she would explain, gathering all 4 into her arms during their evening storytime ritual. "But what matters most is the love we share." The scent of their freshly washed hair and the warmth of their small bodies pressed against her became her anchor, reminding her of what truly mattered. Eleanor's support proved invaluable during these moments. She had a way of appearing just when Sarah's strength threatened to falter, armed with practical solutions and the kind of wisdom that only comes from living through life's storms. "You're giving them something more valuable than a traditional family," Eleanor would say, helping to fold the endless mountains of laundry. "You're showing them what real strength looks like." As the quadruplets approached their 4th birthday, Sarah received her first promotion at Thompson & Associates. The additional income allowed her to start saving for a place of their own, though the thought of leaving Eleanor's protective embrace filled her with equal parts excitement and anxiety. The promotion also meant longer hours and more responsibility, forcing Sarah to become even more creative with time management. She developed systems for everything: color-coded calendars on the refrigerator, meal prep Sundays that turned into family cooking adventures, and homework stations designed to accommodate 4 different learning styles. The dining room transformed into command central, with Eleanor often serving as lieutenant general in their daily operations. The children's unique bond proved to be both a blessing and a challenge in preschool. Their teachers marveled at their ability to work together, but also stressed the importance of developing individual independence. Sarah worked with each child separately, nurturing their unique interests while maintaining their powerful connection as quadruplets. Joshua joined a children's soccer program, his natural leadership abilities making him a quick favorite among teammates. Nathan discovered a passion for storytelling through pictures, filling countless notebooks with his illustrations. Emma's empathy led her to become a sort of playground diplomat, helping other children resolve conflicts. Grace's quick wit and physical comedy made her a natural for the drama programs at the local community center, but life had a way of testing their carefully constructed routine. The first major challenge came when all 4 children caught chickenpox simultaneously. Sarah took 2 weeks of leave from work, transforming the living room into a recovery ward complete with oatmeal baths and calamine lotion stations. Eleanor's famous chicken soup became a staple, its aroma filling the house with comfort and healing. Through it all, Sarah documented their journey. She kept journals, took countless photos, and saved artwork and school projects. Someday, she would think as she added another memory to their growing collection, they'll understand just how extraordinary their story is. The quadruplets' 5th birthday party became a celebration of not just their lives, but of the remarkable family they had built. The backyard of Eleanor's home filled with friends from school, neighbors who had become like family, and colleagues who had supported Sarah through countless challenges. The air buzzed with laughter and conversation, the sweet scent of birthday cake mixing with the earthy aroma of fall leaves. As Sarah watched her children blow out their candles, all 4 working together to extinguish the flames, she felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. Yes, their path had been unconventional. Yes, there had been struggles and tears and moments of doubt. But looking at her 4 beautiful children, their faces glowing with joy and possibility, she knew that every challenge had been worth it. That evening, after the guests had gone home and the cleanup was complete, Sarah sat in the quiet of the living room, surrounded by birthday debris and sleeping children. Eleanor joined her, bringing 2 cups of chamomile tea. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from years of shared battles and victories. "You've built something beautiful," Eleanor said finally, her voice soft with pride. "Something real and true." Sarah looked at her sleeping children, their bodies sprawled across blankets and couch cushions in the familiar chaos that defined their lives. Joshua's arm was protectively draped over Nathan's shoulder. Emma and Grace had their fingers intertwined even in sleep. The sight made her heart swell with an emotion too complex for words. The next morning brought a shift in their family dynamic that none of them had anticipated. Sarah received an email from her supervisor at Thompson & Associates announcing a senior position opening in the digital marketing department. The role would mean a significant salary increase, enough to finally move into their own place, but it would also require more responsibility and longer hours. Sarah's fingers hovered over her keyboard as she considered the implications, the morning sunlight streaming through the kitchen window casting shadows across her coffee cup. "You should go for it," Eleanor said, reading the conflict on her daughter's face. She was preparing breakfast for the quadruplets, the familiar sounds of cereal hitting bowls and juice being poured creating a morning symphony. "We'll figure out the logistics together, just like we always do." The following weeks became a whirlwind of preparation. Sarah threw herself into researching the position, preparing her presentation and updating her portfolio, often working late into the night after the children had gone to bed. The quadruplets, now old enough to understand that something important was happening, tried to help in their own ways. Joshua took it upon himself to organize their morning routine, creating a chart with pictures to help his siblings remember each step. Nathan drew elaborate good luck cards, his artistic skills growing more impressive with each creation. Emma made sure to give extra hugs and words of encouragement, while Grace kept everyone laughing with her increasingly sophisticated jokes about job interviews. The day of the interview arrived with a crisp autumn breeze that carried the scent of possibility. Sarah stood before her mirror, adjusting her blazer and touching the simple silver necklace that had been a gift from her children on Mother's Day. Each of the quadruplets had contributed their allowance money to buy it, and it had become her talisman of sorts. "You look like a superhero," Grace declared, watching from the doorway in her mismatched pajamas. "A professional superhero," Joshua added seriously. "With special powers to make everyone smile," Emma chimed in, "and magic, words that make everything better," Nathan concluded quietly. Their faith in her abilities brought tears to Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them back quickly. She couldn't afford to mess up her makeup now. Instead, She gathered them all in for a group hug, breathing in the scent of kid shampoo and morning toast that clung to their hair. The interview process was rigorous, spanning several hours and multiple meetings. Sarah presented her ideas for modernizing the company's digital presence, drawing on her years of experience and the unique perspective she'd gained as a single mother of quadruplets. Adaptability and efficiency aren't just buzzwords for me, she explained to the panel. They're survival skills I've mastered out of necessity. When the call came a week later offering her the position, Sarah was helping the quadruplets with their homework at the kitchen table. The children watched her face as she spoke, their expressions mirroring her growing excitement. As soon as she hung up, they erupted in cheers, papers flying everywhere as they jumped up to hug her. The promotion marked the beginning of a new chapter for their family. With the increased income, Sarah could finally start looking for their own place. The search for an apartment became a family affair, with each child maintaining their own wish list. Joshua wanted a park nearby for soccer practice. Nathan hoped for a room with good natural light for drawing. Emma insisted on a kitchen big, enough for family meals, while Grace dreamed of a space where they could put on plays. They found their new home in a modest but well-maintained apartment complex just 15 minutes from Eleanor's house. The building had a small community garden, a playground visible from their windows, and enough space for each child to have their own desk in the shared bedroom. Moving day became a celebration of sorts, with neighbors from Eleanor's street and colleagues from work showing up to help carry boxes and arrange furniture. The transition wasn't without its challenges. The first few nights in the new apartment were difficult, with the quadruplets adjusting to new sounds and shadows. Sarah found herself making midnight rounds, soothing worried minds and reminding them that change, while scary, could also be exciting. "But what if we need Grandma in the middle of the night?" Emma asked, her voice small in the darkness. "Grandma is just a phone call away," Sarah assured them, "and she's already promised to come over for Sunday brunches and whenever else we need her." As they settled into their new routine, Sarah noticed subtle changes in each of her children. Joshua's leadership qualities began to manifest in more mature ways. He started a study group with his classmates and organized a recycling program in their building. Nathan's artistic talents flourished in their new environment, his drawings becoming more detailed and expressive. Emma's natural empathy led her to befriend several lonely kids at school, while Grace's humor evolved to include clever observations about their new neighbors and community. The apartment complex turned out to be home to several other single-parent families, creating an unexpected support network. Sarah found herself exchanging childcare duties with Lisa from apartment 3B, whose twin daughters were the same age as the quadruplets. The children's playground became a gathering spot where parents could share advice, concerns, and the kind of understanding that only comes from walking similar paths. One evening, as Sarah sat on their small balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, she reflected on how far they'd come. The sound of her children's laughter drifted through the open window. They were playing their invented game of quadruplet detectives in the living room, complete with magnifying glasses made from toilet paper rolls. Eleanor's words from years ago echoed in her mind. "You're giving them something more valuable than a traditional family." Looking at their lives now, Sarah finally understood the full truth of that statement. Her children were growing up surrounded by love, supported by a community that had chosen to be there for them, and learning firsthand about resilience, adaptability, and the power of unconditional love. The cool evening air carried the scent of someone's barbecue and the distant sound of children playing in the courtyard. Sarah closed her eyes, letting the peaceful moment wash over her. They had created their own definition of family, one that was constantly growing and evolving, yet remained unshakably strong at its core. The tranquil moment was interrupted by the sharp ring of her phone. Sarah's heart skipped a beat when she saw the hospital's number flash across the screen. The familiar surge of anxiety that accompanied unexpected calls rushed through her body, but she steadied her voice as she answered. "Mrs. Mitchell? This is Dr. Anderson from Memorial Hospital." The doctor's voice was professional but gentle. "Your ex-husband, Michael, has been admitted to our emergency department. He's been asking to speak with you." The words hung in the air like static before a storm. Sarah's fingers tightened. Around the phone as memories of their last encounter flooded back. The accusations, the anger, the pain that had taken years to heal. Through the window, she could still hear her children's laughter, the sound anchoring her to the present moment. "He's very ill, Mrs. Mitchell," Dr. Anderson continued into the silence. "He's been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He says he has important things he needs to tell you and the children." Sarah's mind raced through a kaleidoscope of emotions: anger, pity, confusion, and something else she couldn't quite name. The sun had almost completely set now, casting long shadows across their balcony. Inside, she could hear Grace launching into one of her elaborate storytelling sessions, her voice rising and falling with dramatic flair. After ending the call, Sarah sat in the growing darkness, her thoughts tumbling like clothes in a dryer. The decision she faced wasn't just about her anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. Her children deserved to know their father, even if only to understand their own story better. But they also deserved to be protected from the kind of pain she'd experienced at his hands. Eleanor answered on the first ring when Sarah called. The familiar sound of her mother's voice helped to clear some of the mental fog. "Whatever you decide," Eleanor said after Sarah explained the situation, "I'll support you. But remember, forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it just means letting go of the anger for your own peace." That night, after the quadruplets were tucked into bed, Sarah sat at their small kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea, the steam rising in delicate spirals in the dim light. She pulled out her journal, a habit she'd maintained since the children were born, and began to write, trying to make sense of her thoughts. The next morning brought clarity with the sunrise. Sarah gathered her children in their living room, the morning light streaming through the windows creating patterns on the carpet. They sat in their usual spots, Joshua on the big armchair, Nathan cross-legged on the floor with his sketchbook, Emma and Grace sharing the couch, their shoulders touching. "There's something important we need to talk about," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the flutter in her stomach. She watched their faces carefully as she explained about their father's condition and his request to see them. The room fell into a silence deeper than any she'd experienced with them before. Joshua was the first to speak, his young face serious. "Is he still angry at us?" "No, sweetheart," Sarah assured him, though the truth was she couldn't be certain of anything when it came to Michael. "He's sick, and he wants to make things right." Emma, ever the emotional barometer of the family, moved to sit closer to her mother. "Are you scared, Mom?" The question caught Sarah off guard. She'd been so focused on protecting them that she hadn't fully acknowledged her own feelings. "A little," she admitted. "But being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what's right even when you are scared." Nathan had been quietly drawing throughout the conversation, and now he held up his sketchbook. On the page he'd drawn their family, all 5 of them, surrounded by a protective circle of light. "We're stronger together," he said simply. Grace, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "Can Grandma come with us?" Sarah smiled, reaching out to squeeze her daughter's hand. "Of course. Grandma will always be there when we need her." The decision made, Sarah spent the next few days preparing her children for the hospital visit. She explained what they might see, what they might feel, and emphasized that whatever emotions came up were okay. Eleanor helped by sharing stories, from her own experiences with forgiveness and healing, her wisdom wrapped in the gentle metaphors that always seemed to reach the children's hearts. The morning of the visit arrived with a soft drizzle that made the world seem somehow smaller and more intimate. Sarah dressed with particular care, choosing an outfit that made her feel strong yet approachable. The quadruplets, now in their Sunday best, sat quietly in the back of the car as Eleanor drove them to Memorial Hospital. The antiseptic smell of the hospital corridors brought back vivid memories of the day the quadruplets were born. The joy, the pain, the beginning of their journey as a family. Sarah held tight to Emma's hand on one side and Nathan's on the other, while Joshua and Grace walked close behind with Eleanor. Together they made their way to the oncology ward, their footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. Outside room 312, Sarah paused, taking a deep breath. The steady beeping of medical equipment filtered through the partially closed door, a rhythmic reminder of life's fragility. Through the small window, she could see Michael's figure in the bed, so different from the angry man who had stormed out of their lives years ago. The illness had carved deep hollows in his cheeks, and his once robust frame seemed to barely make an impression under the hospital blankets. "Remember," Sarah whispered to her children, kneeling down to meet their eyes, "you don't have to say or do anything you don't want to. Grandma and I are right here with you." Eleanor positioned herself strategically by the door, her presence a silent guardian of their emotional well-being. Joshua, ever the protector, stepped slightly in front of his siblings as Sarah pushed the door open. The room smelled of sanitizer and illness, undercutting the artificial freshness of hospital-grade air freshener. Michael's eyes opened at the sound of their entrance, and for a moment, Sarah saw a flash of their old life in those familiar blue depths. Sunday morning pancakes, Christmas tree decorating, dreams of a future that had shattered like thin ice under the weight of prejudice and anger. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice raspy and weak, "you came." His gaze moved to the children, and tears began to roll down his hollow cheeks. "They're so beautiful, so grown." The quadruplets stood in a tight cluster, their individual reactions playing across their faces. Joshua maintained his protective stance, his young shoulders squared with a strength beyond his years. Nathan clutched his ever-present sketchbook, like a shield, while Emma's natural empathy seemed to war with her instinct for self-preservation. Grace, usually quick with a joke, remained uncharacteristically solemn. "These are your children," Sarah said firmly, emphasizing the word "your" with gentle force. "Joshua, Nathan, Emma, and Grace." Michael nodded, unable to speak for a moment, as emotion overwhelmed him. When he finally found his voice, it carried the weight of years of regret. "I've been watching you all from afar," he admitted. "At your school plays, soccer games, art shows. I was too much of a coward to come forward, too ashamed of what I'd done." Sarah felt her heart constrict at this revelation. How many times had she scanned crowds at school events, unconsciously searching for his face? How many moments of their children's lives had he witnessed as a shadow at the edges of their happiness? "The doctors say I don't have much time left," Michael continued, his words interrupted by a bout of coughing. "But before I go, I need you all to know the truth. I've always known you were my children. I let fear and prejudice poison my mind and my heart." The genetics counselor explained everything about genetic heritage and DNA expression, but I wouldn't accept it. My own father's racism had such a deep hold on me. Emma, her heart opening despite her initial hesitation, moved closer to the bed. "Did you stop loving us?" she asked, her voice small but steady. Michael's face crumpled. "No, sweetheart. I never stopped loving you. I stopped loving myself. I became someone I didn't recognize. Someone who could walk away from 4 perfect babies because of the color of their skin. The shame of that decision has haunted me every day since." Nathan had begun sketching, his pencil moving rapidly across paper as he processed his emotions the way he knew best. Joshua maintained his protective stance, but had shifted slightly, closer, while Grace watched everything with unusually serious eyes. Sarah found herself moving to stand beside the bed, not for Michael's comfort but for her children's sake. "Why tell us now?" she asked, keeping her voice gentle but firm. "Because they deserve to know that none of this was their fault," Michael replied, his breath becoming more labored. "Because I want them to understand that sometimes people we love can make terrible mistakes, but that doesn't diminish their worth or potential. Because I hope that by acknowledging my failures, I might help prevent them from carrying the same prejudices forward." A nurse appeared in the doorway, gesturing that Michael needed his medication. Sarah used this moment to gather her children close, checking their emotional temperature with the intuition of a mother who had spent years attuned to their every need. "Would you like to show your father your latest art, Nathan?" she suggested softly, recognizing her quiet son's need for a bridge between his emotions and expression. Nathan hesitated, then stepped forward, turning his sketchbook around. Trion. The page he had captured the scene before them, but with a remarkable difference. In his drawing, light seemed to flow between all of them, connecting them despite the physical and emotional distance. Michael's gaunt face crumpled with fresh tears as he studied the image. "You have an extraordinary gift," he whispered. "All of you do. I see it now. Your strength, your compassion, your creativity. Everything I was too blind to see before." The visit continued for another hour, with each child gradually finding their own way to interact with their father. Joshua asked direct questions about family medical history, thinking practically even in this emotional moment. Emma's natural empathy led her to hold Michael's hand as he shared stories from his own childhood. Grace, finally breaking her silence, told him about her latest school play, her words carrying a hint of her usual humor. As they prepared to leave, Michael reached for Sarah's hand. "I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I hope you can help them understand that my failures were never about them. They were always about my own weakness." Sarah looked at their joined hands, his pale and thin, hers strong from years of carrying, the weight of single parenthood. "Understanding comes with time," she replied carefully. "We'll work through this together, as we've done with everything else." The drive home from the hospital wrapped them in contemplative silence, broken only by the soft patter of rain against the car windows and the occasional distant rumble of thunder. Eleanor, sensing the weight of unspoken emotions, took a detour past their favorite ice cream shop, a family tradition that had marked both celebrations and difficult moments throughout the years. That evening, as the storm outside intensified, their apartment became a sanctuary for processing the day's events. Sarah watched as each of her children found their own way to cope with the complexity of their emotions. Joshua retreated to his desk, methodically organizing his soccer trading cards, a habit she'd noticed he turned to when trying to make sense of difficult situations. Nathan sat cross-legged by the window, his sketchbook open to fresh pages as he captured the storm both outside and within. Emma curled up with their elderly cat, Whiskers, stroking his fur with the kind of gentle thoughtfulness that always preceded her deepest questions. Grace, surprisingly, had pulled out old family photo albums, studying the few early pictures they had with an intensity that belied her usual light-hearted demeanor. "Mom," Emma finally spoke, her voice carrying across the quiet room. "Is it okay to feel sad for someone who hurt you?" Sarah settled onto the couch, making space for any of her children who wanted to join her. "Of course it is, sweetheart. Feelings don't have to make perfect sense to be valid." Joshua looked up from his cards. "He said he was watching us all this time. Why didn't he ever say anything?" "Fear can make people do strange things," Sarah answered carefully. "Sometimes it's easier to hide than to face the consequences of our mistakes." "But we're his DNA," Grace interjected, using one of her new, favorite words from science class. "Didn't he know that?" Sarah patted the space beside her, and one by one the quadruplets gravitated to the couch, creating their familiar pile of tangled limbs and shared warmth. Sometimes people let their prejudices become stronger than scientific facts. Your father, he grew up with certain beliefs that were wrong, but they were deeply ingrained. Nathan, who had brought his sketchbook with him, showed them his latest drawing. It depicted their family tree, but instead of the traditional branches, he had drawn it as a garden with different types of flowers growing together. "We're like these flowers," he explained softly, "all different but growing in the same garden." The metaphor brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "That's beautiful, Nathan, and very wise." Over the next few weeks, their family rhythm adjusted to accommodate regular hospital visits. Each visit revealed new layers to their evolving relationship with Michael. He shared stories from his own childhood, some happy, some that helped them understand the roots of his prejudices. He spoke of his own father's harsh beliefs and how they had shaped his worldview, not as an excuse but as a cautionary tale about the power of inherited prejudice. The quadruplets approached these visits in their own unique ways. Joshua, practical as ever, created a schedule to ensure they each had time to share their interests with their father. Nathan brought new sketches each time, his art becoming a bridge for communication when words felt inadequate. Emma, with her natural empathy, often sat closest to Michael's bed, intuitively knowing when he needed water or when pain made talking difficult. Grace gradually returned to her humorous self, bringing light moments to the heavy atmosphere with her clever observations and gentle jokes. Sarah found herself navigating complex emotions of her own. Watching Michael interact with their children stirred up memories, both painful and precious. She remembered the joy in his eyes when they first learned they were expecting, the way he had painted the nursery himself, the dreams they had shared before everything shattered. But she also remembered the coldness in his voice when he had accused her of infidelity, the hurt in his eyes that had turned to anger, the weight of his rejection that she had carried for so many years. Eleanor remained their steady anchor through it all. She accompanied them to most visits, her presence a reminder of the unconditional love that had sustained them through their darkest days. She helped the children process their feelings afterward, sharing wisdom wrapped in simple stories and gentle guidance. One particularly significant moment came when Michael asked to see the children's school reports and artwork. Sarah had brought a carefully curated collection, watching as he pored over each piece with tears in his eyes. "I missed so much," he whispered, tracing his finger over Nathan's early drawings. "So many firsts. So many moments I can never get back." "But you're here now," Emma said, her voice carrying that mixture of forgiveness and wisdom that sometimes made Sarah forget. She was still so young. "And we're making new memories." The impact of these visits began to show in subtle ways. Joshua's protective stance gradually softened, though he remained watchful. Nathan's artwork began to incorporate more color, moving away from the muted tones he had favored since learning about his father's illness. Emma's natural tendency to take care of others found a new focus, while Grace's humor took on a gentler edge when directed at their father's condition. Sarah noticed changes in herself as well. The tight knot of anger she had carried for so long began to loosen, not because Michael deserved forgiveness, but because holding on to the anger was heavier than letting it go. She found herself sharing more stories about the children's early years, filling in the gaps of time he had missed, not to ease his guilt but to complete their family narrative.